Okay. Brian, can you say something? Spell your name and title.
Sure. Brian Green, BrianGreene, President, Houston Food Bank.
Did you get that, Rebecca? I have... Yeah, that's fine. And then I'm going to turn down the delay. I have a 4-second delay, but my signal is strong, so I'm going to bring it back down to like a 2-second delay. Okay, got it. Got it. Okay. Okay, all right. Okay, I'm gonna start interviewing you now, and they're recording you, so you're
Understood.
live. Okay, got it. Or not live, but you're being recorded. So, Brian, can you explain to me where we're at right now and what is going on behind you?
Well, hello, Palm Springs, California, and welcome to Houston Food Bank. We are a sister food bank to the Fine Food Bank, and we do pretty much the same thing, but here in Texas.
And then where are we standing right now?
So you're standing in our main warehouse right now. This is about a 300,000 square foot facility, and normal conditions, we were doing about 450,000 pounds a day. That's about like 12 tractor trailer loads. Since the pandemic began, we've been running generally about 20 plus tractor trailer loads a day. And now we've been hit, of course, by the little ice storm, and that's created a new demand.
So, Brian, out in California, we hear things from, the big news outfits, as well as our local news outfits. But from your perspective, working with the communities, which communities are the ones that were hardest hit by what just happened with your storms?
Well, it's often been said that disasters don't discriminate, and that is not true. Although anybody can have their electricity off, as people got to see what it's like to be a low-income family where not being able to afford consistent utilities can be a problem. Well, they saw for a few days at least what that's like. But the difference is for the low-income families, first off, when the businesses close, people who are working hourly are far less likely to get paid. So they lost up to a week's worth of wages. And then if they did have their pipes freeze, the expense of dealing with that is not something they have savings for. 40% of Americans don't have $400 they can call upon in an emergency. That's what we're dealing with right now. We're still dealing with a lot of households who don't have water, who lost food because their freezer, refrigerator went down, and for most people that's inconvenience, but low-income families, that could be a disaster. But what we're going to be dealing with actually for weeks and many months to come are the households for whom it could be a $400 expense, it could be a $5,000 expense more, because when those pipes burst and all that damage had, if you don't have the resources to absorb that, you've got a real disaster that's going to last a long time.
So how fast did it take the Houston Food Bank to ramp up and start serving the community? Because your staff and you were going through the same things that the rest of the residents were going through. So how did you respond so quickly?
Well, unfortunately here in Houston, we are used to having some disasters with hurricanes we've had before. So we always have a write-out team here at the food bank. So we were actually to continue to do some meal distribution throughout. We were serving the shelters of last resort and the warming centers. That was not a lot of demand because the city was trying to keep everybody home. But then we were able to immediately kick off and start the distributions. As with the Fine Food Bank, we work in partnerships with other organizations. And so as everybody else was coming up, we were ready to start the supply. And then for us, the challenge became getting the additional resources from outside the community. And that's flowing in really heavily now.
Good. And how are your relationships with city governments, counties? Obviously, you were at the sports stadium this morning. How do you all come together to serve the community?
Well, like I think all the Feeding America food banks, the community and elected officials have come to see us as a reliable partner in trying to address critical needs in the community in times of distress. So our relationships with the city government, with county government, not just in Harris County, but in the surrounding community is actually really good because we serve their constituents and we don't ask for much to make it happen because, most of this, what we're able to get, we get it for free. It's the surplus and it's just channeling to people in need. And so, I think our relationships work really good. They help us understand where the needs are. We serve those needs and that's helping them in the process.
One of the things out in the desert that we talk about is the double-layered disaster, right? So COVID, and then let's say a major earthquake hits on top of that, and being able to respond to both. You guys went through that double layer disaster. What was it like as a CEO to be able to work with your team in order to manage that?
Well, it really is frustrating. The Feeding America food banks, the reality is we do as much as we can. No food bank in America meets need. We do what we can. And so when you layer on extra need, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have additional resources. And that's what becomes a real challenge for the food banks. So the way we look at it is the better tied we are in with the community, the more that our community looks to us and they're going to help us get those additional resources, the more we can even step up when we're already in an exaggerated output mode. So it's all about community relations. It's about, know your food bank and recognize that when something like this happens, they're going to need help.
Yeah. So Brian, you've been the president and CEO for how many years now at the Houston Food Bank?
Well, I've been at Houston Food Bank for 15 years, but this is my 33rd year in food banking.
And how many disasters have you had to respond to over your 30-year career?
I have had too many disasters to respond to over my 33 years. I mean, the worst one was I was actually with the food bank in New Orleans when Katrina hit, and that was just a really bad experience, I think, for everybody involved. We had a big one with Hurricane Ike here, and then we of course had Hurricane Harvey, and this one, and then there's been smaller ones, May 8th flood in New Orleans, Hurricane Rita here. I wish it would go away.
So one of the things that I reported live today is that Feeding America's sister food banks like to train with each other. For me, this is an amazing experience because I get to come out on site, see how really wonderful food banks handle disasters on mass scale in order for me to bring best practices back to the desert in case we do have an earthquake or a large-scale disaster. I can see how it's been done. I can talk with you about it. I can work with teams. But what advice would you give to us to be ready for some sort of large-scale disaster as a food bank? Like, what can I bring back with me?
So for each individual food banks, one of the things to make sure that they're doing is take the materials that are generated by other food banks. So Debbie, you sat in on our incident command system team meeting. See, this is the way we do it, and we learned that when people are so busy trying to handle all the different problems associated with this, it's really important to make sure that on a much more frequent basis, daily, in a very structured way, we're going through what are the things that each department needs to be taking care of, what are their needs, and how are we coordinating this together. That's one of those things. But I would say the biggest thing for food banks to take away from something like this is how much we'll help each other in a time of crisis. We're very proud that when like New Orleans has a problem or El Paso has a problem, we don't just sit here and say, wow, that's too bad for you. We'll go help. And I can tell you, like when I was in New Orleans for Katrina, the whole country rallied to our help. We had people from food banks all around the country helping us make this possible. And so the biggest lesson is how much we got to think of ourselves as a network, that we are not one organization just serving a community. We're a network of independent organizations who want to make people better, help people be better off.
Sounds good.